All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the Consumer Testing and Developing Your Formula live discussion. It's a little different this time. I know you guys are heading into the consumer testing activity, but we got feedback that it's helpful to have consumer testing discussed before the activity. So I am so grateful to have Dr. Sims with us here today. We'll also later on have Sean McCoy, who is one of the principals at AHA Pure Foods, join us later at 5 to kind of share his story, and you guys can ask questions. So it's a really great week. I know I want to do a few just updates and check-ins really quickly before we kick it off, or before we send it over to Dr. Sims. So I'm going to ask you guys a bunch of questions. I want your honest answers. It's okay, whatever it is. I just want to know where we're at. So, okay, here we go. Got my list. Oh, and first of all, on my list, it says Happy St. Patrick's Day, and I have my little Ireland background going. Okay. Did you turn your recipe into a formula? Yes. Erica. Yes. No, Jocelyn. Debbie on one of her recipes, she worked on it, but not on the other one. Cherokee?
No.
Okay. Alice? That's a no. I can tell. No. Tori? Okay. And then Sarita, yes, awesome, Sarita. That's great. Okay, so this is really important to do. And so I would really encourage you guys to take the time to write it down, and write it down really specifically. Include things in there about like what temperature, you can even, you know, like if you have flour, what percentage of gluten you're using, different things. What we find is that sometimes when people maybe do something a little different, make a mistake, it turns out wonderfully, but if they've written down exactly what they did that time, they can replicate it. But if they haven't, it's like gone. So it's really important that you document each time and you have a recipe that you're following. And if you change it, that you're noting that. So another thing about that is that when you're scaling up recipes, sometimes it's not an exact one-to-one. So for instance, if you're making cookies, maybe for 12 cookies, it's this much salt, but for 24 cookies, it's not double that. So do be aware that there's certain ingredients that are different when you start to scale. Okay, and the process flow chart, this is also really important. It's an important part of food safety. It's important for your inspections when those come around. And then to note things like pH, what you expect and all that. I know that a lot of you haven't done lab testing yet, but when you get to that point, you're going to want to have those different measurements in there and noted, okay? So I will keep asking every week if you guys have your recipes down into formulas. So, and if you have flowcharts. Okay, you also got an email from the marketing people with a survey and a booking link. How many people have done the survey?
I haven't yet.
I'm
Okay.
working on it.
Okay, how many people have
Halfway.
booked? Okay,
I only booked with the first gentleman
okay, you
from last
did
week's
the,
discussion.
right, Peter McKay. But okay, so Kristen Chambers sent an email to everyone letting you know what the next steps for the individualized marketing assistance looks like. And that's to help you build marketing plans, logos. Oh, Jocelyn, you already met with them? Okay, great. Logos, packaging, websites, all that stuff. So please book those and get those surveys in as soon as possible. It's a really cool thing. And They have a lot to do once you guys get through that part. They have a lot of design work that needs to be done. So the sooner you get started on this process, the sooner you'll have those assets, marketing assets. Okay, next up. Did anyone meet with Peter? Alice said yes. Jocelyn, how did that go? Was that helpful?
It was amazing.
Oh, Jocelyn, were you able to actually log on? Because I don't have a password to get on.
No, we didn't log on. We just did all the research, and then he downloaded and sent everything to me via PDF. And what we didn't get a chance to do, we're going to set a second meeting to go through the rest of it.
Yeah, he
So
said he was going to get back with me.
During your meeting, Alice, he wrote us an email saying, do they have Gator One cards? Wanda had talked with him last year about this, that you guys didn't have Gator One cards. And so Wanda has sorted that out with him. And I believe you can do what Jocelyn did if you want to set up another meeting with him, and he can just download those reports for you. So we cleared that up. You were the first one to go. I'm sorry you were the guinea pig, but you've helped everyone else out. So thank you. But that shouldn't be an issue for anyone else at this point.
Whatever,
okay.
if I could add in, Katie, so whatever you can't download or access with him, or if you find resources afterwards, then let one of us know, myself or JB, and we have access to the system. But normally you could just set up a meeting, a follow-up meeting with Peter to get access to additional from there.
Oh, so I could actually get in if I call him back, and then I can actually log in?
No, you won't be able to log
Do it
in.
for you.
Well,
Okay.
okay. And then I sent out, I know a lot of you filled out the shirt order link for the Farm2Food shirt. I just want to clarify, because I got a question on that. We pay for that. We send them to you. You don't pay for shipping. You don't pay for the shirt. It's just like a nice thing that we do. So there you go. All right. Did you watch the lab testing videos? Yes. Oh, that's great. Okay, that was more nods than I expected. Wonderful. Okay. And then I think this is my last question. What do you know what lab test you would need to do for your product? No. Okay. So we need to help you connect those dots. That's good for us to know. Thank you for telling me that. Okay. And last up, I had a minor surgical procedure this morning, and I was like under a general anesthesia, so I'm a little fuzzy right now, but everything is good. So if you guys ask me a question and I'm kind of spacey, I apologize in advance. But I really wanted to be here today because I wanted to see Dr. Sims' presentation, and I enjoyed him last time and all the tips that he had, because really helpful things. So with that, I will pass it over to Dr. Sims to introduce himself, and then we'll probably go around the room and have each of you introduce yourselves really quickly.
Yep. Well, thanks, Katie. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I was here last year and talked to the group, and I learned a lot and hopefully gave the group some tips that were helpful. And sensory testing is something that you'll want to do at some point. And certainly, as Katie mentioned, setting your recipes and scaling it up and doing all your lab analysis and getting all the legal and micro stuff has to be done also. But at some point, your product has to taste good. And that's not easy to measure. And so that's what I do. I'm a food scientist, and I've been in the food science and human nutrition department for 35 years. And my main area of research and teaching is food quality and sensory evaluation. And so that's what I do. I work a lot with the other researchers here at UF doing sensory testing. And I have grad students doing research projects. And I work with food companies a lot. So I work with some small startup companies, but I've got to talk tomorrow with Coca-Cola to do some sensory testing with them. So we do sensory testing with a lot of food companies that need our help or can't do it within their company, or just want a third opinion. And so we do a lot of sensory testing, and I really enjoy doing that. I really enjoy working with the food industry. and providing data that you need. So that's kind of what I do. And so the reason you would want to do sensory testing, as I just mentioned, your product has to taste good. And there's very few products out there that have been successful that don't taste good. I can think of a few. Oatmeal is a hideous product without anything on it. So how oatmeal made it so popular, I'll never know, but it has. So there's a few products out there that have historically made it. Cornflakes without anything on it are not a very good product in my opinion, but they've been successful. But for the most part, if you're developing a product, it has to taste really good, and consumers have got to love it for it to be competitive. Because as you know, most new food products that large food companies put out are failures for a lot of different reasons. But certainly if it doesn't taste good, you're really in trouble from the beginning. And so how do you measure whether your food tastes good? Well, you know, you've got your opinions. And so you've been tasting your products. You've probably been getting everybody around you to taste the products, your family, your significant others, friends, and whatever. And you've got to admit, that's probably a pretty biased group. You know, they want to tell you what you want to hear, and yeah, it tastes great. And then they spit it out when you turn your head. So, you know, you need an honest opinion, and your opinion is good. You guys have been working with these products and you know what tastes good and what doesn't. So you can take it a long way, but at some point you probably want to get a good unbiased opinion as to how good is my product compared to some competitive products on the market. And that's where sensory testing really comes in. It takes it from your opinion into a group of unknown people and that don't have any bias. They don't know you. They don't know what your product is. They're just tasting it in a cup with a random number on it. And that's about as unbiased as you can get. And if you do it that way, you can get a good, honest opinion of what people really think about your product. So that's why you would want to do sensory testing. And there's a lot of different tests that I could talk about today, and I'm not going to talk about all of them. But sometimes you want to do a discrimination test. And in that, you just want to know, are two products different or are they the same? So let's say you're scaling up your recipe and one of your ingredients is too expensive. And you realize, I've got to substitute that ingredient. I've got to get another ingredient to substitute for that from another company or whatever. But the last thing I want to do is change my product because I've got it perfect. It tastes just like I want it, but now I've got to change ingredients, or I've got to heat it a little longer, or I've got to do something to it that I didn't expect. Well, in that case, you may want to do a discrimination test just to see if people can tell the difference. And if you can substitute your new ingredient or your organic ingredient and it doesn't change the product, well, that's a win-win. And so sometimes that's what you're trying to do, is just determine whether people can tell a difference between two versions of a product. And then the one that I'm going to be talking about in a minute is consumer acceptability. That's generally what you want to know. It usually gives you the most critical information. What do people really think about your product, or which one do they like the best? And so there's ways to measure that, as we'll talk about. And then the last test that I'm not going to go into at all today is called descriptive analysis. And one thing that you may notice when you do a consumer test, consumers can't tell you much about the product. They can tell you how much they like it and which one they like better. But if I ask you your opinion, if you drink soft drinks, some of you may not, but if I ask you, why do you like Pepsi more than Coke, or Coke more than Pepsi, or Dr. Pepper more than Mountain Dew, whatever, you can say, oh, it just tastes better. But if I ask you to describe why, what's the difference between Coke and Pepsi? You know, could you really tell me, and how many words could you use to describe the difference between Coke and Pepsi? Probably not many. I just like the taste of it better. And that's not helpful if you're designing a product. You want to know, if there's something wrong with my product, what do I need to fix? Is it the taste? Is it the level of salt? Is it the texture? Does it have a bad mouthfeel? And consumers can't really tell you that. And that's where you could train a panel and do descriptive analysis to tell you exactly what characteristic is good or bad about your product compared to another one. And that's extremely difficult to do. It's something that I don't do much of in my research. And you can get it done in a lot of testing laboratories, but it's very expensive, and you better value the information you're going to get, because you're going to pay a pretty good price to have something like that done. So what I'm going to talk about is primarily consumer sensory testing. And I know that Katie has got a very nice worksheet or an exercise that Ann Cologne put together. And I know Ann, I met her last year, and we're on a blueberry project together. And it's a very good worksheet. It's really good. I highly commend you for doing that. So that's some very good tips. I just want to throw my 2 cents worth in as to what I think about consumer testing and some things you should take note of on that. Are there any questions before I get started? I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint and use that as my talking points. It's just maybe a little easier. Katie, do you want everybody to introduce themselves and kind of tell a little bit about what they do, or you want to wait till the end? Or what?
I think it would be great. I also think it helps them practice their like elevator pitch, as we call it.
Sure.
So if everyone could just do 30 seconds, but before that, we have Dr. Sean McCoy with us here. He came a little early so he could hear your presentation, Dr. Sims.
Okay.
He's going to be sharing his story later. But Sean, do you want to quickly say hello? And
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about pricing and entrepreneurship. And Dr. Sims, I used to be in a hoarder's lab next door.
Yes.
So
That's the lab that I'm in right now. I'm in Hodor's old office.
Oh, now you got the big office, man.
Yeah, I got the nice one.
But yeah, the thermally processed orange juice. So I participated in a number of the sensory panels, and
Yes.
you know, it is very useful in product development. And what Dr. Sims was describing about the value engineering when we get into pricing, about if you have to substitute a product, you know, right now, so many things logistically and supply chain are unavailable, or they're unavailable in the time frame that you need. So it's always good to have a couple things that you know you can drop in that aren't as perceptible, and sometimes they also come with lowered costs. So I'll stop there, say hi, and I look forward to hearing about everybody's products.
awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. McCoy. All right. So Debbie, you want to quickly introduce yourself?
I'm taking notes.
Hi.
Here. I'll take some notes. Yep.
Hi, my name is Debbie, and I started Debbie's Grandola, and I created my product for this is lemon ginger turmeric nut balls,
Wow.
and
That's a mouthful.
they're kind of high in protein and stuff, and they're all natural.
Very good.
All right. Thank you, Debbie. Erica.
Uh-huh.
Hi, my name's Erica MacArthur. I've taken a family recipe called pizzelles. It's a traditional Italian waffle cookie. It's usually made around the holidays. And I'm trying to develop those, and also trying to test out some different flavors besides the traditional anise flavor.
Very good.
Amaretto works good too.
Mhm.
All right, Jocelyn, you were next.
My name is Jocelyn Lanier. My husband and I own a cattle ranch here in Central Florida. My product for this cohort is Korean barbecue beef jerky.
Wow. Sounds good.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Pamela, you are next. And Moto is actually Pamela.
Oh, that's me. I didn't realize my name wasn't on there. Can you all see me? Or do you
Yep.
just see a black screen? I'm working
see
today
you.
off the farm. I have a small farm in rural North Florida, and I raise different herbs and livestock, and my product is chicken soup. I have pastured poultry, so I'm hoping to turn those chickens into a value-added product.
Very good.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Pamela. All right, Tori and Linka, you are next.
Okay, so I'm Tori. This is my daughter, Linka. We grow and raise a lot of things, but what we're working on right now is hot and not so hot sauces. Organic, healthy, tastes great. Imagine if your mayonnaise could be good for you.
All right. Cherokee, you're next.
Hi, my name is Cherokee, and my product is a cold pressed wheatgrass shot infused with turmeric, ginger, black pepper, and lemon.
Wow.
Alice.
Hi, my name is Alice Tavasoli, and I am having supply chain issues with my freeze dryers. So I am dehydrating this product, even though the ingredients are the same. I grow fruits, and this product for this class is a strawberry and fruit confection dipped with chocolate, hopefully to be freeze dried, but initially it's just gonna be dehydrated.
Yeah, freeze drying is difficult. It's very expensive too, as you know.
Yeah, my freeze dryer is on its way. It's just, I don't know when.
All right, thank you, Alice. And I don't think Sarita's going to be able to talk, but if she is, I'm going to give just a second.
Yeah, I can
Oh, she
talk.
is, great.
Hello. You can hear me, Katie?
We can. Do you want to introduce yourself, Sarita, and your product?
Yes, I'm Sarita Lachey, based out of Southern Leon County. We are taking a combination of our family's Caribbean and West African bitters, which are herbal tonics made naturally, and we are creating a fruit flavored herbal tonic drink.
Interesting.
All right.
Does that drink contain alcohol? Is that an alcohol product or non-alcohol product?
So traditionally it is infused with alcoholic beverages, but this would be family friendly, so no alcohol here.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
All right. And JB is on the project team, so we have made it through. We may have a couple stragglers join later, but if you want to start your presentation, Dr. Sims, we're good to go.
Sure. Well, that's all very interesting. You guys have got some very creative products. And is everybody in Florida? So this group is all Florida based. Okay, very good. So anyway, yeah, you've got some very novel products, and I'm sure a lot of challenges, it sounds like, with some of those. So I'm sure, but they all sound wonderful. So what I'd like to do, I really want you to ask me questions. So I don't want to just talk and not do anything that's good for you. So I want to make sure you can stop me anytime and ask questions, make a comment or whatever. And I'm not a product developer. And so I'm not very creative actually when it comes to mixing flavors together. I think I'm pretty good at trying to figure out what people like and don't like. So I'm not a real product developer. And so you'll hear a lot better talks about that from other people. But I just want to say, when you get to your product to a rather finished state and you're ready for sensory testing, I'll kind of show you what some options are. So that's what I'm trying to do. And please, again, interrupt me anytime and ask questions. Katie, can I share my screen? I don't know if I'm a co-host or not.
So I'm going to go ahead and make you the actual host. The only thing that I ask, because I know you have to hop off at around 5, is if
Don't
you
end
can
the
give
meeting
it back
for all.
to me. Yeah. Yes, thank you.
I've done that
There
by
you go.
accident before too, yes.
There you go. You got
Okay,
it.
I've got a share screen button. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and pull up my PowerPoint, and I will share this. And so let's do slideshow from the beginning. Okay, can everybody see that okay? This is actually, and Katie, you may be aware of this. This is this lecture is a lecture that I recorded the other day for a class that Dr. Suhan in our department is putting together on food entrepreneurship. And so this is kind of the sensory testing portion of that class. So I thought it may fit in nicely with what you guys may want to know or hear on this. So as I mentioned, there's lots of different types of sensory testing. And this is just one of the more common ones that's done because it's usually the most valuable. And it's the one that I do primarily. So we want to know what people think about your product. So it's also called acceptance preference testing, consumer sensory testing. You'll hear it called a lot. Hedonic. If you hear the word hedonic testing, that just means liking. Hedonic means liking. So we'll talk a little bit about the 9-point hedonic scale. That just is a common scale to measure how much people like things. But in this, it's a very simple concept, a very simple approach. You're getting people who are consumers of your product or potential consumers of your product to taste your product in a blind fashion, in an unbiased manner, and tell you how much they like that product, or given 2 products, which one do you like the best, this one or that one? Or if I give you 4 products, which one do you like the best, the second best, and third best, and all like that. So you're forcing people to tell you how much they like something or which one they prefer. And believe it or not, that's not really easy to do. There's some challenges in doing that, as I'll point out as we go through this. And you've got to remember, this is something that irritates people sometimes in sensory testing. I know the products are different, but they're rated the same. How can that be? And that's very common. If I give you an apple and a banana, you may like an apple and banana the same. And you may not have a clear preference for either one, but clearly they're different. So just because you don't get a difference in the sensory score or a difference in preference doesn't mean the products aren't different. They're just not different enough to create a difference in liking or preference. So keep that in mind. This doesn't substitute for a difference test. If you want to do a difference test, you need to do one of those. And so this doesn't take the place of a discrimination test. And the other thing to keep in mind that I'm sure you're hearing about throughout this course from a lot of different people is good acceptability or high ratings of your product in a sense from a sensory standpoint don't make it a success. And so there's so many other things that I'm sure Katie and all your other speakers are telling you that you need in the marketing, the packaging, blah, 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 advertising that will make your product successful. But you've got to build on layers. And the first layer that I would build on is the product's got to have good consumer acceptability. And it's got to taste good and look good and function well for consumers. So keep that in mind. That's the starting point, but that's no guarantee for success. And the other challenge of this is it's kind of a sampling issue. When you do a consumer test, you would like to do it with thousands of people, but that's just not practical. When we do a consumer test for a food company or part of our research, we usually try for 100 panelists. And if we get 80, we feel pretty good about that. So you need a lot of opinions and you need consumers of that product. And so if you've got a totally novel product, you may not have consumers of that product. People may not know what your product is. And some of the products you described, if they're relatively new concepts that people may not know about. So you want to get people who are apt to consume that or consume something similar that you could pull from. So you're going to select 100 people out of potentially millions and millions of people who could buy your product. You better get a good sample, right? You better get 100 people that really represent that target market. So if I get 100 people to do a mango sensory panel and nobody's ever had a mango, well, then that's not a very good sample. And so you want to make sure that you recruit people, and we'll talk more about this later, who represent the opinions that you're really after. And if you're after people who consume only organic produce or this or that, so there's various ways you can screen for that. But you need a lot of people, because even if you get consumers of mango, one person likes this type of mango and another person likes this type of mango. And there's all difference. When you ask people their opinion about something, there's a lot of variation in our opinions, whether it be politics or anything. And certainly in liking food, we have a lot of differences of opinion. And so that's the reason you need so many people. It's because not everybody's created the same. And I can tell you, and COVID really rocked our sensory testing world, as you might imagine. And we had to shut down for about a year of sensory testing. It just wasn't safe to do it. It wasn't practical. And we're back doing it now, pretty much back to normal, but it was a slow climb back up. And by the way, I don't want to get off the subject too much, but if you've had COVID or if you know many people that have had COVID, a lot of them lose their sense of smell and taste. And that's a very big side effect of it. And unfortunately, that lingers for a while. And so sometimes there may be even some permanent alteration of your taste or smell, which is not good. And so that's something that we don't think impacted our sensory testing, but keep in mind that there's a lot of variation, a lot of individual variation between people, and especially in this world of COVID we're living in. Okay, so a lot of common uses, as you might imagine. There's product maintenance. Right now you're developing a product, so you're really in the product improvement stage, the product development stage, reformulation. But at some point, if you put your product on the market and you start having competitors pop up, let's say, you may want to know, well, how is my product comparing to my competitor's product? You can bet the people who are making plant-based meat products are looking at the other competitors saying, well, how are they doing on their product? And I will guarantee you that orange juice companies in Florida, we work with them a lot, and they're constantly comparing their product against their main competitors. And so they want to, because your product may be getting better or worse, and your competitor's product may be getting better or worse. And you want to know, where in the big picture am I standing? Is my product getting better or worse than my competitor's product? So that's kind of down the road quality control and marketing. How is your product stacking up against new products that are popping up and a new improved versions of your competitor's product? And if you have a new improved version of your product, is it really better than my competitors? So that's a really common use of this and something that we do with food companies a lot. Product improvement and new product development is probably the most common use of this type of test. When you're developing a totally new product, as we'll see in a minute, you need some opinion of that. If you're reformulating, we've already talked about reformulation, and you will probably have to reformulate at some point. And so if you're reformulating your product for a host of reasons, you want to know, well, if I reformulate it, have I made it better? Have I made it worse? Or does it stay the same? And if you have to process it differently, some of you are going to have to heat your product and process it. And if somebody tells you you've got to heat it at a lot higher temperature than you're doing now, well, can you heat it to that high temperature without changing the flavor a lot? So if you process it a little differently, which you may have to, or if you have to package it differently for whatever reason, for aesthetics or some shelf life issue, well, does the packaging change the product in any way? So all of these are good questions, and you can taste these products yourself and say, well, I'm tasting these side by side. I don't really see a difference. But, or you may see a difference that a regular consumer would not see, because you may be more sensitive to your product than someone else might be. So these are good examples of when to use a consumer type of test, and certainly new product development. I know last year, some of the, well, we'll get to it in a minute, you never want to taste a product by itself when you do a test. So you don't want to give people one product and ask them, how much do you like it? And why is that an issue? Why would you think that would be a problem? Anybody have an idea? If I ask you, how much do you like this product? What's the first thing that would pop into your mind? Anybody got a thought on that?
Whether they're hungry or not.
Well, that could have an impact, absolutely, whether you're hungry or not, but it's mainly compared to what?
Compared
Yeah,
to what?
I
Exactly,
don't
like
it as much as
soda
this
versus a wheatgrass shot. Like,
exactly. I like wheatgrass, but I don't like it as much as I like cheesecake, So, you've got to kind of have some anchoring points in this. And so we're really good at comparing things, comparing one product to another one. Which one do you like better? That's pretty easy to do. But when I just give you a product, say, how much do you like it? It's kind of hard to come up with an absolute value. Yes, I've got a question from Erica.
Does the sensory testing, is it mainly just the way that the product, is it looking at the way the product tastes? Or is it actually like having the people look at the packaging also? Or is it just mainly just how it tastes to them?
I'll get a little bit to that in a minute, but for most of the testing that I do, we're focusing on just the sensory characteristics. So we're saying we will often ask the panelists what it looks like, because appearance is a big thing.
Right.
And when we're dealing with fresh produce, we really need to ask tomatoes, for instance, how much do you like the appearance? And then we will also ask them how much they like the texture. Again, the texture or mouthfeel of some products is really, really important. And so appearance and texture. And then we ask them to consume the product and how much did you like the flavor? And overall, we usually ask them first, how much do you like this overall? And then we may ask them some specifics. How much did you like the sweetness? Was it too salty? So we may ask them some very specific questions after that. So sometimes we'll have a questionnaire where we're just asking consumers, how much do you like it overall? And that's it. And sometimes we may ask them 10 questions that may be important to you to provide some feedback on that. So that's a very good question. And we'll go over a little bit of that in a minute. But that's a very good point.
Okay, thank you.
So, so when you've got your new product and you want to do a test, if it's a novel product and there's nothing on the market like it, and some of the class you had last year had some products that there was nothing like it out there. And so what would you benchmark it against? And I suggested something that's similar, something that's in a similar category and that is successful in the marketplace. So if you compare it to a product that is very successful, even though your product is different, do people like it as much as this product? And if they like your product as much as this product that's very successful in the market, that provides you better information than just getting one number back. So that's important to keep in mind. If you're doing a novel product, you need to compare it to something that's close. And sometimes you just have to use your best guess on that. And then finally, I don't know if you guys have talked much about shelf life testing. At some point, you'll have to determine how long does your product last before it starts going bad. And sometimes it's a microbial issue that's going to limit the shelf life. Sometimes it's a color change, but often it's a flavor change. And sometimes the flavor will begin to change before you have a microbial issue or something like that. So, and this is something that you determine, or you have to hire somebody to determine for you. And there's lots of ways to do this. And there's no rules on this. You can basically do whatever you want to determine shelf life testing. It's up to you. But one way is to do a sensory test and compare a fresh product to one that's been stored for 4 months or whatever. And do people like it the same, or do they like the stored product less? And so you could use when the product starts changing enough for consumers to start liking it less, that would be one definition of the end of shelf life. There's others, but that would be one. So shelf life testing is something that you may not be worried about right now, but at some point, if your product hits the market, you'll have to have a use by date or something to help guide your consumers. Okay, any questions so far? I've had some, the questions you've asked are very good. Okay, the most simple test is a head-to-head comparison. And if you're developing a product and you have, for instance, the person that was developing the chicken soup, you know, there's a lot of chicken soups on the market, and you think yours is a knockout, you know, and it probably is. So maybe you want to do a head-to-head competition at some point. I'm going after the best product on the market, and the best Campbell soup or whatever you want to pick out. And I want to compare my product to this. You know they're different, so you know they're different. But is one product preferred over another one? Is my product preferred equally or better than a competitor's product? Sometimes that is the strongest information you can get, because that's a head-to-head competition, and it forces people to pick one. So it's not a wishy-washy test. I've given you these two products. You can't tell me they're equal. You have to pick one. So it's a very strong test if you want to force people to choose. And so sometimes that's what you want to do. I don't know in your cases whether this would be a good test at this point for you, but at some point it might. Or if you've got the older version of your product and you've been tweaking it and have a new and improved version, you could give them the two products side by side. And do you like the new improved version, which is twice as expensive as the old version? And that may be useful information too. So this is a very easy test to do. This is one that you could do at home if you had enough people. You just record the number of people who selected one, the number of people who selected the other one, and you can get good references on the internet. And there's a lot of good sensory books out there that have these tables that are calculated for you. And you would just go to this simple table and look up the number of panelists you had, and it will give you a minimum number. And if the minimum number that chose either A or B is greater than that number, that means you had a significant difference. And if the number of panelists who chose either A or B in your test, if it wasn't greater than that minimum number, then there's no difference. So the bottom line is the statistical analysis, which a lot of people are challenged by statistics, trust me. The statistical analysis is very simple and very straightforward, and that's a nice thing to know. So that's a very strong test if that's the information you want to know. But the problem is that that's all it tells you. So if you do this test and your product is not as preferred as well as your competitor's product, you don't know why. So, well, what was there about my product that wasn't as good? And you can ask people for comments, but comments are often not very valuable, and consumers aren't very good sometimes at giving you comments. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they can say your product wasn't sweet enough, or it had too much salt or not enough salt or something like that. But sometimes you can't really get the information you need to determine why. And the other thing to keep in mind is they may prefer one product over the other one, but they hated both of them. So they really didn't like either product, but they hated one of them more than the other one. Or usually the opposite end, they like both of them. I like Coke and Pepsi both, but I like Coke a little more than Pepsi. And so they may love both of your products, both of these two products, but they like one of them a little more than the other one. So that's important information to have. If they dislike your product, you need to know. And if they really like your product, even though they like the commercial product better, that's still a good thing. And so that's why rating data comes in. So usually you're asking people not to choose one versus the other. Tell me how much you really like it. And so that's hedonic scaling, or measuring how much people like something. That is not difficult. That is extremely difficult to do. And I'll tell you in a minute about a new scale that we're using. But the most common scale that the food industry uses, and I think it's probably the one that Ann Cologne suggests, and it's the one that we use all the time in the work that we do, it's called the 9-point hedonic scale. And it was developed by Natick Labs, which does research for the Army. And it was determined in the late 1940s, or it was developed in the late 1940s to measure how much soldiers like rations, which are historically not been very good. And so this was the scale that they developed, and lo and behold, it's caught on, and it's been used all over the world, and it's used in every food company today across the United States. And the scale is very simple. 1 is dislike extremely, 5 is neither like nor dislike, and 9 is like extremely. So it's a very balanced scale. There's a certain number of dislikes, a certain number of likes, in the middle is neutral, and it works pretty good at comparing products. And so if you rate 3 products on this scale and one of them is rated higher than the other one, that generally means that it's liked better. The absolute numbers don't mean as much. Just because something gets a 7 and something gets a 7.5, that's not as important as the statistical comparison between the numbers. So that's the scale that I would recommend that you use, unless you had some really good reason to use something else. This is a really good starter point, and it works. It's been proven in the real world that it works pretty well. Somebody mentioned, what do you rate? Well, that depends on your product, and each one of you have a unique product. And some of you, appearance may not be an issue, and some of them it may be a huge issue. I would suspect in wheatgrass, the greenness, the color would be a huge issue in that. And maybe the mouthfeel, you know, whether it's chalky or creamy or how thick it is, that may be important. And in other products, that wouldn't be so important. So certainly, overall liking is the most important thing you can ask somebody. They're pretty good at just saying, I like this overall. I may not know exactly why, but I know I like it a lot. And so that's usually the first thing we ask panelists to look at the product. If we're rating appearance, we ask the panelists to rate appearance first and then taste the product and rate everything else. Because you don't want them to eat all the product and then ask them to look at it, and it's a little too late, obviously. So we usually ask the people about appearance first or color, and then ask them, okay, how much do you like it overall? And then you can start breaking it down into, well, how much did you like the flavor? How much did you like the texture? How much did you like the mouthfeel? And just keep in mind, if you get real specific, if you ask people, how much did you like the ginger flavor? Well, a lot of people may not really know what ginger flavor is. You do because you put it in there, but a consumer may not be able to even identify ginger flavor. So just be careful you don't get so specific that people really don't understand what you're asking them to do. So I would keep it relatively simple. And you can not only ask how much you like an attribute, you can ask people how intense it is. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So you can say, well, how sweet is this product? I know people like sweeter products. That's a well-known. If one product's sweeter than the other one, you can bet they're going to like the sweeter product. So that's not rocket science. But you may want to ask people, well, how sweet is this product? How sweet do you think it is? So there's a real art form to developing a questionnaire. And I would encourage you to keep it simple. And you know what characteristics of your product you really need to know about, and keep it at that. And so developing a questionnaire, we'll talk in a little bit, but that's a challenge sometimes. And sometimes we get it wrong, and we get a test back, and we realize we should have asked this question, or there was no reason to ask this one. So sometimes it's an art form. And so how many samples can you rate at a test? And this is simple. You know, you never want to rate one by itself generally. So you want to always have 2 samples. And we never ask people to rate more than 6. 6 is a lot. You know, if you think about it, some of your products may have a very strong flavor. They may be very filling. And when people taste 6 samples, number one, they're losing interest. You know, they're getting bored, and they may not be giving you good data. They're getting adapted to the flavor, or they're getting adapted to something in the food system. And they're just not as sensitive on that 6th sample as they were on the first. So when we do a sensory test, we usually keep it to 2 to 4 samples, and we feel like that's all we can really collect good data on at one point. The problem with this type of data, collecting rating data with 100 people, is you have to do a lot of statistical analysis, and this scares people away sometimes. And so you have to do an analysis of variance. You just can't average. Tell me the average score for sample A, the average score for sample B, and the average score for sample C. You just can't look at those averages and say, oh, my product scored higher than the other. My product was a 7.2, and this one was a 7.0, and this one was a 6.0. You can't just compare those and make any conclusions until you do statistical analysis. And so that's what you do, the analysis of variance. And that's something, some of you may be very familiar with this, and it may be an unknown term to some of you, but it's a rather complicated analysis that you have to do. You can do it in Excel, and there's computer programs that do it for you. And we use a sensory software, and it automatically does it for us. So sometimes if you're collecting rating data, you may need some assistance in analyzing the data. And I can tell you this, if you need statistical help, don't be shy, ask for it. I ask for statistical help all the time from statisticians. And so know your limits of statistics, because otherwise you may make a bad conclusion. And that's the worst thing you want to do. So the statistical analysis becomes more complex with rating data. We're just about to the end here. So these are some examples of scale. Yes,
Can I
please.
pause you for just a second?
Yes.
I had a question come in about how much sensory tests generally cost. And I know it's probably a big range.
I'll talk to
but-
that. And let me get to that in a minute. I'll get to that in a minute and
Sure.
tell you where you can do this and how much. And that's a very good question, very legitimate. These are some scales that just come out of a sensory book, just for fun to show you. This is the scale that we use. And this is the one that you're going to use. This is the format that we use. It's a 1 to 9 scale. 1 is dislike extremely, 9 is like extremely, and 5 is neither like nor dislike. So that's the scale that we use. There's all sorts of scales out there that you can use. If you're dealing with kids or you're dealing with people who can't read or write, then you've got an issue. And so there's smiley faces for kids. There's the puppy dog face. And I think these are just more novel than real useful. And I can tell you working with kids is very difficult. And number one, you have to get the parents' permission. And if you're testing in a school environment, for instance, the teachers would love you to do that because it gives the kids something to do. But it's hard to work with kids. And so a lot of your products, if you're designing products for kids, it's going to be more of a challenge getting their opinions. I can tell you that. Okay, and this is another type of scale that I mentioned. Sometimes you want to force people to think about certain specifics. For instance, if you wanted to ask, what did you think about the ginger flavor in that? If people could pick out the ginger. So these are called just about right scale. So you could have one for ginger flavor, and this would be too little, this would be too much, and in the middle is just right. So to me, this forces people to make a comment about some specific characteristic. This is a beef stew example. So the amount of saltiness, for instance, is it too low, is it just right, or is it too high? So this is good. A good type of scale is called a just about right, or JAR scale, that you can get some useful information on a very specific attribute. So if you want to ask sweetness, sweetness would be not sweet enough, which is impossible. This would be, or be possible. Too sweet would be about impossible, and just right in the middle. Or you could have something as just too little flavor, or too much flavor, or too little spice, or too much spice. So you could get creative, and your product, you could ask some specifics about various characteristics. And then how many panelists do you need? I just mentioned you need a lot of panelists. You want people who use your product, as I just mentioned. And we have a database of about 1,000 panelists on campus. And we can recruit and we can get people who consume blueberries or strawberries or whatever product that we're screening for. So make sure people that you select are people who use your product or may use your product or open to using it or whatever. And sometimes you may want to know something about demographics. Are you designing a product for a certain age group or a certain gender or even a certain income level? If you've got a product that's very expensive, you may want to select only people who could really afford that or shop at a certain type of grocery store. And so sometimes you want people with certain demographics, but usually you're selecting people who consume your product or would consume your product. And so get panelists that represent the target population. And screening is through email today. We use email for screening. If you're trying to do this at your location, it's going to be more difficult. Where do you get 100 people who consume your product? That's not going to be easy for you to identify. So sometimes it's hard to go out and get the panelists. And so this is why this presents some challenges for you trying to do this by yourself. I'll just leave it at that. And so I think this is the last slide I have. And this goes back to the question, where can you get this done and how much does it cost? So you could try it yourself. Just be careful. And if you're trying it yourself, I would be happy to help you. And so if you want to design a test and do it with your people, I would be happy to help you. You can reach out to me anytime. And I can help you if you want to try this. An employee panels would be if you're in a food company and you get your employees to do a sensory test. So if you're working at Tropicana in Bradenton and you have a sensory test on orange juice every day at 4 o'clock, you get your panelists to come in from your company. That's really easy and cheap to do, but do you think those people have some biases about the orange juice they're producing? You bet you they would. So this is not an unbiased test at all. And so most of this type of testing is done in what we call central location test. And that's what we are. So the University of Florida, the sensory testing we do, we sample from an unbiased population. We have no dog in this fight. So we're basically just presenting these samples in an unbiased manner and trying to provide you some good data. And so that's what we're trying to do. And there's a lot of testing laboratories that do this also. There's one in Gainesville called MiraU, and they do sensory testing. You could approach them and tell them what you want to do, and they would be happy to do it for you. But everybody charges. And so the testing labs, I don't know what a testing lab would charge you, but if you were to do a 3-sample test with 100 panelists, I would say it would be at least $5,000 and maybe close to $10,000 and maybe higher than that. So I can't quote you on that because I don't work there. When we're doing a sensory test that I just described for a food company, we usually charge $4,000. And if we're writing this into a grant, we usually build in $4,000 per test. And that includes everything except the product. You would have to supply the product. And we're a public university, so we're not trying to make money. So I have worked with people for free too. So if, if on a case-by-case basis, if you have something that you're desperate to get tested, I'll be happy to talk to you and see what we can do. So you can get a lot of free help, but keep in mind that sometimes free help is not very valuable. And sometimes you have to pay for it. And unfortunately, but universities are sometimes a good place to start. And if that doesn't give you what you need, you can go to a testing lab, and sometimes that's the best approach also. And sometimes you can do a home use test. I'm not even going to get into that because that's something that's out of the realm of what we're trying to talk about today. So let me stop sharing my screen, and I've done all the talking. I'll be happy to listen to any of your thoughts or comments, please, questions. I have not been looking at the chat too, so I don't know what's in chat. So
first off, Dr. Sims, I just want to say that that is incredibly generous and wonderful of you, and thank you for that offer. Really appreciate that, and I know everyone here does too. So yeah, any questions, anybody? Jocelyn, go for it.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, because you're talking getting a group of panelists together, like 80 to 100 people. Could you do it on a small scale, like the same test and the same questionnaire, but like 10 people here and then get another 10 people and another 10 people and then compile that at the end?
You could, as long as the product's not changing over time. You know, if you're making different batches of the product and you're making a new batch and you're giving it to 10 people, and then a week from now, you get 10 other people to do it and you give them the batch again. You know, you can do that as long as your product's consistent. We recruit 100 people, and they would come in over the course of 3 or 4 hours. And so we would do it within the course of a day. There's nothing magical about that. If you've got 3 samples, it's really important for all the panelists to compare all the samples side by side. So you wouldn't want 10 people evaluating one product, and then you create another version tomorrow and you get 10 other people to do that, but they're 10 different people. So you wouldn't want to do that. So you would want to keep the products the same for all the panelists. But yeah, that would be an approach to do. If you could get 10 people this week and then 20 next week or 15, you could accumulate the data that way. And that would not be ideal, but certainly that's a more practical way to do it. Yes.
Okay, I'm in my head. I'm like, oh, I wonder. I might just do this on a small scale to just start using some of this as an opinion, and then do like a formal testing later on down the road.
You know, you can always do it and see what the data looks like and see what you get. Tori, you've got a question. Somebody's got their hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sims. I was curious because our product, I mean, as we developed it, we've discovered that the hot sauce and the not so hot sauce is, it's really more of a refrigerated product. So not like the little bottles with the vinegary pepper that has, can sit on the shelf. So it would be refrigerated. It doesn't have quite as many products that are like it. And we've found that it can be used as a condiment, right? Like mayonnaise, ketchup, or mustard, but it can also be used as an ingredient in various different recipes for preparing food, like those same products. And I was wondering if you had ideas about comparable products, since it's kind of an unusual thing, that might be good to compare to.
Sometimes that's a real challenge. You know, if you're doing, I'll just make this up. If you're doing a habanero sauce, which I love habanero, but it's really hot. So if you're doing a habanero sauce and you want to compare it to another hot sauce, I would choose something that's kind of the same thickness level. You wouldn't want to compare it if it's a real thick sauce. And some hot sauces are really thick, more ketchup based, and some of them are like Tabasco sauce, a very thin base. I would choose something that's probably similar in viscosity or consistency a similar hotness level, if that's important. And try to just do your best to compare it to things that you think are similar to that are in the market and are that successful, you know. So sometimes that's a challenge. And the other thing, temperature is a huge factor. So you wouldn't want to compare one cold and one at room temperature. So I would, if you're comparing your product to a product that's normally kept at room temperature, I would refrigerate the other product. If I were comparing your product that's refrigerated to ketchup, I would chill the ketchup and do them at the same temperature. So you definitely would want to serve them all at the same temperature, whatever that would be.
Tori, do you know what your pH is?
I do not at this point.
Yeah, that'll be
You're
important.
in Gainesville?
I'm sorry,
Are you
what was,
near
I didn't.
Gainesville? Are you near Gainesville?
Oh, no, we're south of Miami.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the pH testing can give you some other details and options. You said you're not vinegar based, but you want to see where you're at too, even if it's refrigerated.
Okay, yeah.
So those testers, like, you want a good one, but ones that can give you a general idea with a controller, you know, a couple $100 or less.
Yeah,
Okay.
pH is critical. It sure is, Sean. You're right. Alice, you've got your hand up. Alice, I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Sorry. Yes. So when you bring in your 80 to 100 people into the university over like a day or two, you said, do you
Usually
put
one
them
day.
in? Do you put them in individual booths with the door that goes up? They take the sample, put it back, check it off, or do you like bring them all into a room at the same time at a table and everybody's doing it?
No, that's a very good question. I should have had a picture. We have a nice sensory lab. So we have 18 individual booths. And so the panelists would come down and sit in a booth, a private booth that's got a door, as you said, and all their data entry is on a computer screen. So we computerize the questionnaire and they're basically just pointing and clicking with the mouse on a computer screen. And so that's how they enter in their ratings and their comments. And you're right, then we open up the hatch and we give them their samples and take them back and do it that way. So that's the way we're doing it. But you could do that at home in a similar format. You just don't want people talking with each other. So if you're doing it at a table, you know, you could have spread them out or put a cardboard partition up so that people aren't comparing notes, so to speak. You know, you don't want somebody saying, I didn't like this product very much, and somebody said, I liked it. So you just don't want people talking back and forth. But there's nothing magical about setting in a booth to do a sensory test. It's just the way that we do it. It's probably the best way, but it's not the only way. But I wouldn't want them sitting around the table together, coming up with a communal answer. So that's what you're trying to avoid.
So I'll just throw in that in Oregon, Washington, and Nevada, they're going to farmers markets and testing at a table. And one of the participants had a really great idea so that she didn't have to sort through all that paper. She made an online form and did a QR code for the booth. So they just scan the QR code and then do it on their own phone. They're not touching things in the age of COVID. And so I thought that was a great idea.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. The other day we did a test at the Fresh Food Company here on campus, one of the food eateries. First time we've done that. Our computer program will generate a questionnaire and we can create a QR code. So basically the students, we had 400 students that did the test and they just scanned the QR code and their questionnaire popped up on their screen. So that's something that we could help you guys with. I'll just throw that out. We could make an experimental design and create a QR code and send it to you. And then anybody with a cell phone, you have to have internet service, obviously. And then anybody with an iPhone could scan it and do the questionnaire right on their phone. And the data would come automatically back to us through our program. So and that's a tool that I think we will start using more and more, you know, as we go forward. So that's something to throw out. If you want to talk to me about that, I'll be happy to talk to you anytime. So I'm glad you asked that question and brought that up.
So I hate to do this because I know there's so much more that we could get from Dr. Sims. He's obviously very willing to work with everyone. If you want to reach out to him, I will provide his email address. It's
Please.
Also, I think, in the weekly email, but we are going to kind of shift gears a little bit, and I'm sorry because Dr. Sims is great.
And I've got to
But
leave in
I
about
promise
5
you-
minutes. And I've got to leave in about
Okay.
5 minutes. So please contact me anytime. And Sean, I'll listen to you start, but I've got to get off in a couple of minutes.
All right. And
Perfect.
also wonderful is Dr. McCoy. And just a little heads up, last time he came for our pricing week, when we first reached out to him, the email said pricing. And I know you were saying pricing earlier, but he has, I think, a background in food science. And so this is actually kind of the developing your formula week as well. Sean, feel free to talk about whatever area of food entrepreneurship you want to. We want to hear your story. We are open to whatever is natural and flows. So with that, I will pass it over to you to introduce yourself and share your story.
Okay. Everybody can hear me okay? That's a yes. Okay. All right. So I'm a University of Florida graduate. So my minor's in food science. So catty corner, the office of Dr. Simpson. I was in a lab and I worked on some surimi. Has anybody had surimi before? Imitation crab meat? Yeah, it's disgusting. But hey, it helped me get my PhD. So you don't have to like it or not. So I'm a physiologist by training. So an exercise physiologist. So I worked on a lot of neurodegenerative disease. I moved on and worked for a French pharmaceutical company on oncology and palliative care products, like support products for people going through radiation and chemotherapy that involved medicinal mushrooms. So then I got more deeply into medicinal mushrooms, and locally in Gainesville, I've worked on multiple products for Dole and Eggland's Best and a few other projects. If you guys are familiar with those two brands. But I also work with Aha Pure Foods. So that's a plant-based soup company. If you're near Gainesville, you can pick it up in Wards. Used to be able to buy it in Lucky's. So soup is one of those. And, you know, we have a chicken soup person on the phone. Soup is one of those wholesome, filling, palliative, healing type products that you take. It's warm, makes your belly feel good and full. Hopefully it keeps you from eating too many sweets, even though everybody loves sweets. So we looked at that as being our first line of product. Then we started working with the Villages Grown, which is just south of Gainesville in this big retirement community with a hydroponic farm. And now we're doing salad dressings, salsas, hummus, you know, a multitude of products, chimichurri, ahis that are more aligned with, I think it's Tori doing the hot sauces. So just as Dr. Sims said, you know, there needs to be that discernment. I used to teach entrepreneurship across the state for the workforce board. I used to teach it at Career Source, North Central Florida, to multiple different populations. Everybody wants to always come to you and say, I want to start a restaurant. Like that's the business they want to start. When they don't understand that if you're already married, when you open a restaurant, you're married twice because you're married to the restaurant and you're married to whoever you're married to. It's long hours. The margins are horrible. Lots of things can go bad. Real estate prices are up through the roof. Nobody can get any workforce and employees. But the most important thing that's more pertinent to this call is everybody thinks that they cook well or make great food. But those people that want to open a restaurant, sometimes no one outside of their family has ever tried their food, right? So to Dr. Sims' point, the sensory testing is something that you want to do because you want to be discerning before you plunk in your life savings or a lot of sweat equity into a project. You want to ensure that somebody actually outside your family, your 20 friends, your local Elks or Moose Lodge or whatever groups you're affiliated with, someone besides you likes your chili, right? So this is how we start to do product testing in the market. And I try to make this fun because, you know, it's after 5 o'clock, it's St. Patty's Day. I want you guys to have a good time. So I'll try to inject a little bit of humor there. So you want to make sure that everyone likes your product. You do some testing, you do some market testing. But pricing is very important, especially right now in this economy and this time. So cost of goods, you guys have seen gas, so gas changes at the pump, shipping changes and the costs, product availability because of shipping and gas costs and, storms or supplier demand or workforce and production. I have a client right now that, needs to buy like 40,000 cases of rice paper. They can't get it. So there's times when your business is going great and then something comes up. But each of those things has a cost. So how many people here think $15 an hour is the way to success, and at $15 an hour, you're gonna have a fruitful life? Raise your hand, I'll screen through. I don't see any hands yet. Hold on, we're scrolling. So I can't see everybody's camera. So how many of you have actually thought about your input cost of labor when pricing to sell your product? I'll say it again. So you're cooking grandma's magical ragu spaghetti sauce. She got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to have that sauce simmered and ready for you at 6 o'clock for dinner. How many of you have done an accounting of your time of what it takes you to make one batch, one unit, one case? Okay, Tori said yes. Okay. Now, when you did that time, are you more entrepreneurial? Are you more like somebody on Shark Tank? Or when you actually calculated the costs, do you see yourself more as the Uber driver that basically breaking even, paying the lease on your car, filling it with gas and having $5 in your pocket?
We actually
You
found
guys
it.
can answer off on mute.
Yeah, I mean, it's really complicated, right? I think that there are a number of us that we're not just making it, but we're growing it. And so I think as you start adding up those costs, it's like how far, how far back we go. And, we've been kind of continuing to build that list in terms of not only how much does it all cost, but which parts of this process do we really want to do, right? Do you want to be in from the tilling the ground all the way to the booth at the farmer's market? Or are there places in between? And so yeah, it's been, I don't have a dollar figure, but we've been playing around with that in conversation, particularly because my daughter's working with us. And so at 14, almost 15, she's thinking pretty hard about, gee, do I want to be an adult with a full-time job? And if so, what kind of job will that be?
You do. And how do I say your name? Linka? Yeah, you do. You always want to work all the time. I only love my kids more than I love money. That's it. I love money. And my kids are just like some days a little bit above it, some days, maybe right there. But you want to do an accounting of all of your time. So what Tori was saying, so I'll give you a quick example. I make a delicious butternut squash bisque. You guys may have seen Oprah does a butternut soup. Her soup is garbage. It's full of sodium. It tastes horrible. If Dr. Sims had it in a sensory testing lab, people would be puking it out, throwing it up in trash cans, tossing the samples away, refusing, getting up and walking out, right? Mine's delicious. It also has some bitter melon in it to help reduce and control your blood sugar, okay? But depending upon the case cost of butternut squash, has anybody peeled butternut squash? Let me see some hands. Lots of people are dark and hiding while they're cooking dinner, getting ready for St. Patty's Day. It takes forever to peel a butternut squash without making too much waste, right? All of a sudden you're losing product. You're using product weight that you can make into soup. So sometimes, like recently, butternut squash prices have gone up. Do you know what's cheaper and easier for me to buy? Already pre-cubed, pre-cut butternut squash. So then I don't have that $1 an hour labor cost for 2 people sitting there peeling potatoes, peeling butternut squash. Now they're cooking soup. But that's only the cost of butternut squash got over a certain threshold. And you guys are gonna have fluctuations. So who has the ginger drinks? Who is ginger?
I actually just had a thought when you were
Anybody?
saying that, because I was like, if something is powdered, that could be incorporated into one of the surveys, like a substitution survey. I forget exactly what he called it. But to see if like having the fresh ingredient versus some kind of powdered version or
Right,
something.
most people, unless you like your teas, like everybody's had Snapple in their life, right? So you've seen some sedimentation in your drinks. So I make drinks also. So I produce drinks in Ocala. So I make like a ginger hibiscus drink that has mushrooms in it and, a bunch of different
Nice.
other stuff. But could you take all those ingredients, make them into a powder, put a little bit of flavor in it, and you guys have seen the Crystal Light tear off? They put it in water, shake it up. So those things are like 0.13 grams of product. So you find a co-packer to do that, and then use your labor, time, effort, and energy on marketing, and have a little flipboard cardboard box? Or do you sit there and make hundreds of gallons of drink that now, with supply chain and gas costs, it's going to cost you $115 to ship that pallet? Or you're going to sit there and you've got people off eBay, a lot of stuff. All right, let me turn the video off. See if that helps. Can you guys hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. It's bandwidth. I'm in Punta Gorda, Florida. I just finished a presentation, so I blame it on these Southwest Floridians. So, now that everything costs more to ship, do you want to sit there and do orders of eBay that are going to cost $4 of shipping, or do you want to do something that you could send out with 2 stamps? Because what matters, everybody gets excited when they start making money, right? Does everybody understand? Have you guys gone over the difference between, revenue, profit? Have you guys gone over that in your classes? So
This is
everybody, when
more
they-
centered around food production more than like business terms
Okay.
and those
Okay.
sorts of things. There's some of that, but it's built
Okay,
into the
perfect.
food production.
So what I'll tell you just simply is profitability helps build and drive your business. So there's times that you sell out all your sauces, you sell all your drinks at the farmer's market, but until you capture all those costs, you don't know if you made money, right? If you're not making money, but it's bringing you joy and you're seeing the enrichment and then the liveliness of people's face as they get that first kiss of your product on their lips and their tongue, and you just feel so good, that's a hobby. That's not a business. Okay? And some people that hurts their feelings, but it's great to have hobbies, but it depends on what your dreams are. I'm here to help you realize your dreams. You have to understand that there's input costs, and we want to make sure that we're profitable because we all want to retire one day. And everybody gets attached to their baby, but what your goal should be is you get one really good product company, and then you take that company and you sell it to somebody. Because even the people in your household, how many of the people around you say, oh, I can do that better than Shelly or Mikey or Bobby? Everybody always thinks they can do stuff better than you. Let them pay for the opportunity to try, right? So that's when you sell your company, you want to be able to have the opportunity that you gain like a windfall, and then you can go on and do that next dream that you have. So with the soup company, what happened was I was at the Innovation Hub at the University of Florida. People knew that I worked on mushrooms. A group called Paleoganic was working on a mushroom soup. One of the investors knew that I worked in mushrooms in France, and they said, can you come talk to these guys? And then that's how I got involved in the company. We expanded all the way through Lucky's before they closed. We were doing great in sales. Lucky's went down. Then, everybody that works in food had the pandemic hit. So we've now switched that we're doing more food service and more restaurants for the dressings. So we just changed the channel that we're selling into. So the base, the foundation of your business is always have good books, keep track of everything in the receipts, because one day you're going to sell this baby on the market and make money. And number 2 is that allows you to calculate the cost of your goods and also your profit. It doesn't have to get crazy, but you still want to see where you're at and where you're at, because somebody wanted a freeze dryer, right? Well, freeze dryers are expensive. So you want to make sure that you're getting enough money in the door that that freeze dryer with the energy input costs are paying itself off. Now, freeze dried foods sell at a premium. So was that Alice that had the freeze dry foods? Okay, Alice, you know who you're going to go after? All of the snowbirds and the RV people. They eat freeze dried foods, soups, mixes. That's who you're going to go. And they already have an RV that costs $100,000. Don't be afraid to price it like crazy, like $5.99 for 4 ounces of, peas and carrots freeze dried with a little bit of, beef bouillon dried up in there.
Oh, that's a great
Make
idea.
that
I
money.
was hitting the mountain and backpacking people, but you're right, RV people, snowbirds, and God knows there's so many in Florida right now.
Yeah, exactly. So that's who your Facebook and your other targets are going to be. And, the people, I have gray hair. I think everybody can see it. But when I had the video on, so the thing is, people that are there also, they'll still read the Valpak mailers. Those people still read actual mail called snail mail in you younger people terms. So there may be easier ways to target and market to those people, or you do an event at an RV park or a resort and let people sample all your stuff, because they look for stuff to do, because they've been walking around the same thing, playing golf, playing pickleball. Like, you have this delicious, yummy pick-me-up of freeze-dried stuff that they can go back and they don't have to spend their money at the store.
I think anybody in this
ginger
group,
people-
though, anybody in this group could sell to RV people and snowbirds because we're all local Florida.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a market, but they travel a lot, they go to different states, they need long shelf life. If your project's refrigerated, maybe not, because they have really small fridges on there, so it'd have to be really special. So like the ginger people, like fresh ginger, that zest, that kick, that back of the mouth feel, like when Dr. Sims was talking about mouth feel and different things, that you can still get it from the powder. And the powder doesn't go bad. Powder doesn't dry out. It may help in the shelf stability. If you're mixing with a drink, it may blend better versus sedimenting in the drinks. So you can try all that. But the drink people, we also need to check what your pH is on a product to see if it sort of hits like an acidified food, because that'll help a lot with shelf life.
So
Like, you can get a product.
Sean, I have a quick favor to ask. Would you be willing to, one of the questions we asked the women earlier today was if they knew which of the 3 primary lab tests, bricks, pH, and water activity, which they needed to do for their product. And across the board, we kind of got the answer of no. Is there any way I could send you a list of the products and that you could just quickly say which one you would recommend?
Well, and then the thing is too, is that I may have an extra pH meter. And if I drop it off to you, then you may be able to FedEx it around and everybody ships it to everybody. And it'd be like, we're having like a little party. Or you can
That's an
talk
idea.
to or you can talk to Miss Wanda Eugene and you guys can buy one, since you're going to keep doing this. You buy one for $400 with the control. And then the local people, you let them come test at UF. And then the further people, you ship them with FedEx with a return, and you let them test it. And then the next day they send it back. Just to get an
Great
idea.
idea.
I mean, it makes a big difference. Well, I mean, I am a UF grad, so of course I have great ideas. And I'm Irish, and it is St. Patty's Day. So we have all this stuff coming together all at once. So, and then JB, what was your product? I'm sorry.
I'm the program coordinator within UF, so I don't have a product.
Oh, okay. I was like, man, I don't remember what she said. Where's my anise cookie person that's going to switch to amaretto?
That's me. Erica.
Okay, hold on. Erica. All right, because I can only see like 3 or 4 of you guys at a time. So, okay. So yes. So again, like your product, yours is more water activity. So how dry can you make your waffle cookies without them being so stale that it tastes like you're eating an airline biscuit on a plane and getting your, 4 ounces of soda. But keeping mold retardation, other things like that. Well, maybe there's some other salts that you're going to use. Maybe you increase the salt content and the sweetness at the same time. There's different ways to look at doing that. Or maybe it's a packaging, or maybe you freeze it, or maybe they're refrigerated. But yours is mostly in the wetness of your product. So how much water
Okay.
activity does it have? Because you don't want them to sit out and get moldy or too stale.
Yep.
But most of the others were pH, I think. So I'm gonna stop because I'm Irish and I talk a lot, and I don't even remember when this thing ends. So if everybody wants to fire questions at me. So has anybody ever eaten the Dole, like a shaker? Like it's a frozen thing from Dole Foods you find in the frozen food section. So that's one of the products that I worked on. It's like frozen fruit, it's supposed to be healthy. And then everybody's had Eggland's Best Eggs before. Okay,
Yep.
so they're at Publix and a bunch of places. They're just like a higher end egg. So their orange color of the yolk, do you know what that comes from? They feed it marigolds. They feed marigold meal, the flour, to get that nice orangey color. So I worked with them on trying to increase the vitamin D2 content of the eggs and shell strength. So fire away with any questions.
Good
ahead, Tori.
afternoon, Sarita here. How are you?
Yep. Okay, hold on. All right, Sarita, how's it going?
It's going. I have a question for you. Do you have any resources for juice co-packers?
Now, when you say juice, what kind of juices are we talking again? What's the base? What's the base juice?
So my product is the fruit flavored herbal tonic, and all of our recipes start out with ginger, with a ginger base, and then we add the fruit blends and the herbs and spices.
Okay. And is it carbonated or non-carbonated?
It's non-carbonated. It is kept in the refrigerator section. We've had a pH test done. The pH level is kind of high at the moment because
what do you consider high?
It's between 7 and 8.
Oh, that's super high. That's super duper high. Yeah. So that's one of the things is we can work on dropping other acids. Like this isn't a 70s reference. Dropping acids means like lemon juice. Everybody will get all excited.
Yeah.
So we can toss in some lemon. You could toss in lemon juice and try to get that down to 4. Or if you want it to really be a neutral based product, then we have to guarantee always that it's refrigerated throughout the supply chain, which increases costs, and your shelf life is going to be reduced probably to less than 60 days. Now, that doesn't mean that we're in a bad spot. What it means is also you could look at people for like aseptic packaging, or we could potentially see about making it a concentrate. You ever push the button on the juice things at the hotel when it mixes your orange juice with water?
Yes.
Okay, so you may be able to make it a concentrate, and then when it's reconstituted, the water that you add to it makes it more neutral like it tastes right now, but it may be a little bit more acidified in the concentrate, but it's something we'd have to work on.
Okay, thank
but
you.
I mean, I can make your product in Ocala at Prima Foods. I mean, we just have to work on your pH. So for everybody that's a resource that doesn't want to do all their own processing, if you get your recipe and we find out that it's profitable, I work with Prima Foods International in Ocala, so it's right down the road. So, my chef's there 4 or 5 days a week pumping out products, but we can usually try to schedule in advance, like a batch testing day. Just like Dr. Sims, everything has a cost, but we can work out what those product development costs are. Could do a couple, a 40-gallon kettle. If you want 8 or 16 ounce refrigerated drinks, we could look at thermally processing them, and boom, that have like 10, 20, 30 cases with your label, as long as you have liability insurance, which hopefully everybody's starting to look at. If you have product liability insurance, which I would have even for a farmer's market, then I would take it out and do that sensory testing on that batch just in the community. Because if somebody's like, oh, it gave me heartburn or, made me sick, then you have some protection. So product liability insurance is always one of those first tier things that you spend a couple $100 to a couple thousand, depending on your provider and volume and sales. But it's always something besides establishing an LLC as a legal entity. I'm good with sharing it. Like, everybody in Gainesville has my cell phone number. So you guys can text anytime. I'm usually in meetings, but I'm always willing to try to reach out and help anybody out with anything. So what else? So who else had another ginger product?
I do.
Ginger lemon balls, Debbie?
I do. Yeah, I was wondering because my product is a raw product.
Right. So like yours, it's going to be important for shelf stability, and yours is going to be more the microbiology, like what kind of fuzzy, furry, blue and black things are going to grow on it. And then how are you packaging in cellophane?
No, I've got pouches that I'm putting them in.
Like
little
Mylar aluminum pouches with a window?
No, they're the plastic lined. I think it's 6-ply.
Okay, but they're stand-up pouches that are silver?
They're
with a
stand-up
resealable
pouches that have craft paper on the outside.
Okay.
I actually have
So
one.
one of the other things too is like, you may look at vacuum sealing. So I bought a vacuum sealer for like $4,000, and it does up to a 4-pound or a gallon bag. So depending upon what sizes, you may look at vacuum sealing to keep any microbial growth down on your raw product. And then that may increase your shelf life. And, it's an input cost of a couple thousand, but then you're good to go.
So you'd have to have that much of we have a vacuum pack one here, but it's not like that. It's just a sealer that sucks out the air, and it doesn't work on these bags.
Right, that's what I'm saying. You may switch to a Mylar bag or a different bag.
I
I know
see.
with the natural thing, a lot of people are like, I don't want aluminum and I don't want X, Y, and Z, but if you get your product on the market, sometimes our dreams and wishes are different than those of the consumer. So
I also thought about having it as a refrigerated product.
yep, that works too. Again, that's just shelf stability. How long do you have to sell it?
Gotcha.
And how fast are you selling? All right.
Okay.
And other questions?
All right, well, we do wrap up at 5:30, so we probably have time for one more question, and then I had a couple last announcements.
Okay, can I just ask a question then quick? This is
Sure.
Pat White. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. And on a question about chicken eggs, sometimes when I'm separating them, and I knew marigolds can color, but also the capsaicin from the peppers and pepper flakes can also add a nice color to egg yolks. But I don't want the egg yolks, I want the egg whites. And some of them are kind of tender, the egg yolks. So when separating them, I kind of waste some egg whites. And I think it's a protein issue, but I was wondering your thoughts on it, on how I can strengthen the membrane around those egg yolks to make them separating, even when I chill them and then wait for them to warm up later so I can whip them up to the meringues. What can I do to strengthen those egg yolks to make the egg white and egg yolk separating easier?
I'll have to think on it. I mean, I don't know if there's a dietary thing to change it for the chickens as much as there's probably like a tall whiskey glass. Like you probably have to find a way that's mechanical.
I have no idea. What is whiskey? Just kidding. Sorry.
So if you have like you probably want a physical means of separating. You want to be able to find a glass that basically goes down like the UFO picking you up for medical experiments, covers the egg yolk, and then you can whip it around and then remove it from the egg whites. Similar to like boiling your eggs and then running them under cold water. Yeah, everybody has different methods of separating the shell from the egg. You may have to look at a different physical thing to sort of pull the egg yolk out without disrupting your egg whites as much. Like, are you doing it with a spoon right now?
No, I'm doing it the way I normally do. It's just that some hens, I feel like it's a protein issue. I've gone from having hens that were always coop contained and had a specific diet to ones that go roaming around and can choose what they eat. So I have less control over what they eat. And I've been doing some research and I feel like protein might be the issue. And I actually physically do it with, in my hands. So it's not like getting up against hard separation or sharp edges of anything. And some of them will just basically break with.
I mean, for the meringues, for the meringues and stuff like that, like you're going to be applying a mechanical force to them. So that really doesn't mess up the lysozyme and the albumin as much. That doesn't mess up the lysozyme and the albumin as much because lysozyme's pretty stable. So you may be being too easy on it. It just may be more of a separation issue of the whites. Like you're not going to damage the egg white as much as you probably think with a mechanical separation tool.
No, I'm just talking about, I open up an egg. I've just been having an issue with opening up an egg and then just cracking it open and having the egg yolk obliterate. And then once it does that, your egg white is gone. You can't use that in a meringue.
Sure.
So,
okay.
Anyway,
yeah, I'm not sure about that one on the chicken physiology side. I apologize.
No worries.
All right, so I'll stop talking because I know you have other questions. I put my check everybody. So.
All right. Thank you, Dr. McCoy.
Feel free to text.
Thank you. That was informative.
Yeah.
That was wonderful.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. So Dr. McCoy had some awesome ideas, and he obviously has a lot of expertise. He was generous enough to share his contact information. So if you want to reach out to him, I will also put it in the weekly email next week, along with Dr. Sims's contact information. So, and thank you for that offer on the pH meter. That was a very cool offer. So I'll check with Wanda and JB about that. All right, so last two little notes. The first is that your activity for consumer testing that you have to do this week, it is a little different than what Dr. Sims talked about. So it includes packaging and pricing information. There's obviously a value in doing that whole presentation. And it's two experts. They're both wonderful. Dr. Sims is actually working with the person who wrote the article and the activity. So they're colleagues and appreciate each other. But, if you can't get someone to buy the package at the price, then they're never going to taste it. But if they taste it and they don't like it, then you're out of luck. Then they're not going to buy it again. So it's really important to do both that sensory testing that Dr. Sims talked about without that, and then to do the other. Your activity will be focused around the other. I want you to feel free to do whatever is best for the information that you need to gather at this point. So if it is just unbiased taste information that you need, if you have not done that yet, please, please, please do that. We know people who have sunk a lot of capital into products that did not do that step, and then they just had to throw all the product away because no one would eat it. And that is a very, very sad story that we do not want to repeat. Luckily, it was no one in our program, but I still feel terrible for her for having to go through that. It was very devastating for her. I don't want anyone to be in that same boat. So please, like, if I can tell you to do anything, it's getting that unbiased feedback on your product. So use the methods that Dr. Sims mentioned, use what's in the article and in the activity, but just do that. The other thing is we are starting to hold information sessions for a program called 10 and 5. And that is, JB is a much bigger role in that one, and it's Wanda's baby too. That program is centered around high growth tech entrepreneurship. And I thought of some of the people in here, Erica, with some of your engineering background. I didn't know if you were interested in any agri-tech ideas. Cherokee, I thought of you. Anyone else that I don't know what you do with your other time. If you are interested in it, we are having another information session in April. So you can also, I will send out information in the weekly email that just gives you the link so you can sign up for the newsletter on that and stay updated. But I did want to let you know that that program is coming out of the laboratory soon, which is very exciting. But once again, that's only for technology. That's technology in high growth. Like you want to scale, you want to take this baby big. So with that, unless anyone has any other questions, we're going to wrap it up for the day. Anybody? All right. Have a wonderful week. If you need anything from us, please feel free to email, of course. And I will see you guys next week. Good luck with your testing.